let me also take this time, of course it's still early in the year, to welcome you all to the bank. We value you. You are very key stakeholders of the bank. The Monetary Policy Committee of the bank met yesterday to deliberate on the global, regional, and domestic economic developments. At this meeting, the Monetary Policy Committee have decided to leave the repo rate unchanged at 6.75%. This rate is deemed to be appropriate to continue supporting the domestic economic growth while maintaining the one-on-one link between the Namibia dollar and the South African rand. Now, having arrived at that decision, what are some of the things that we looked at? We looked at the global economy, how things are moving. The assessment, we came to a conclusion that the global economy have started moderating in 2018. The moderation was recorded at 3.7%, coming from 3.8% recorded in 2017. That moderation is mainly on account of both the key advanced economies and emerging market and developing economies that perform poorly. Among the advanced economies, some of the economies that moderated in terms of their growth, we see the moderation in growth in the Euro area. We see the moderation of growth in the United Kingdom. We have also seen a moderation of growth in Japan. However, the United States, I think, their growth continue to accelerate. In the group of the emerging market and developing economies, again, just as we have seen it at the global and advanced economies, we have also seen moderation. That moderation came from 4.7% that was witnessed in 2017 to 4.6% recorded in 2018. That moderation was on account of some of the key economies that moderated in 2018. For instance, China moderated, South Africa did, and Angola as well. We cite Angola in that category because it's one of our key trading partners. In that group as well, there are economies that registered a positive growth. For instance, Brazil registered a very positive growth, India as well, and Russia. Now, overall, going forward, we see the global economy is going to slow down for the year 2019. That slowdown, the number that we have is going to be around 3.5%. So you see now a continuous kind of very consecutive moderation coming from 3.8, getting to 3.7, and now moving to 3.5. So you could see that somehow growth globally is losing traction. Now, coming back to the domestic economy, of course, I think it's very essential to put the global context first before you get to the domestic economy. The domestic economy, we cannot really say much compared to what we have shared with you last time. Again, we see a contraction. If you may recall, in 2017, the economy contracted by 0.9%. This year, 2018, we have also seen a contraction. We are still busy firming up the number because the numbers that we have got now are estimates. And possibly within a week or two, we will be sharing with you the economic outlook. But all what I can say is that that contraction will still continue in 2018. Although at this point in time, we do not have the firm number, but we'll be sharing with you on that. But what I can confirm at least that contraction for 2018, it's likely to be less than the contraction of 2017. It's still a contraction, it's not a good news, but the good thing is that it is decreasing. What are some of the sectors that really contributed still to that contraction? We have seen that agriculture did not do well. Manufacturing also as well. And wholesale and retail, which is one of the key sectors. And construction, of course, continue still to contract. But wherever you see a negative spot, there will always be some positive avenues as well. Mining, I think, still continue in 2018 to show some kind of positive signs. I believe the smaller contraction that we see in 2018, if it were not for sectors like mining, we could have seen a much larger contraction. What we see in 2019 going forward, we see some bright spots of some sectors that are going to help aid growth. Transport and communication sector seems to be one of them. Construction, that has been under depression for almost 3 years back, I think it's really likely to come back to become one of the bright spots. But we may not really see the level of growth that we have seen in the past. I think it's going to be it's going to be a positive growth, but very marginal. We will not be going back to that level that we have seen, the level of 25% or double-digit growth. So that possibly we may not go back to that soon. So we see 2019, the economy will register a positive number, at least for the first time within the last 3 years. On the inflation front, again, inflation has also moderated. In 2017, the economy recorded an inflation rate of 6.2%. In 2018, inflation rate moderated to about 4.3%. And that was mainly on account of moderation in inflation for housing and food inflation. What do we see for the inflation moving forward? We believe that the inflation will still continue to be well contained. We foresee average inflation for 2019 to be around 5.6%. That's what we are foreseeing. Why a bit of an uptick? If you look at our inflation basket, there are two key components. The first one, I think, is housing. That constitutes about 28%. The second one is food. That constitutes about 16%. The third one is transport. That constitutes about 14%. And now that uptick, it's likely to come from housing, mainly from things like utilities and rental, which are captured in the inflation to be part of housing. For instance, if the municipality decide to increase utility like water, electricity, so you see that as part of housing. So that's why, more or less, we are in our projection. We are projecting that 5.6. But of course, it's too early in the year. That projection, as we are progressing in the year, it may change. On the domestic private sector credit extension, private sector credit extension, of course, is a mirror image of the economy. When the economy is not doing well, or if there is a slowdown in the domestic demand, clearly that is also reflected in a private sector credit extension to both the household, which is individual, and also to business. On overall, we have seen a very consistent deceleration of private sector credit extension over the last 3 years. In 2016, the private sector credit extension stood at 11.4%, that is a growth. In 2017, it moderated to about 6.6%. In 2018, it moderated further to around 6.2%. Again, as I have just stated, is the mirror image of what you see in the domestic demand. Coming to the external sector, the good thing is that when you look at the balance of payment in terms of the current account, we see that the current account deficit has narrowed. You may recall 3 years, 4 years back, there was a time when we had a current account deficit, 11%, more than 10% of GDP. Now the current account deficit has moderated, I shouldn't say moderation, it has come down quite significantly. If you look at our numbers, the current account deficit is less than 2% of GDP. So if you go to the statistics, I think you may see that in 2015, 2016, it was about 17 billion, whereas now we are talking about 3 billion deficit. So that really shows quite a very progressive and a welcome development, especially given the economy that is growing slowly. Now, having given you that picture, one of our key components that we look at is the international foreign reserves. The international foreign reserves still remain at a respectable level. Last time when we met, we reported a figure of about, in December, 31st of December, I think we had about 31 billion. Now, as of 31st of January, we have got a figure of 30.7 billion NAM dollar. Now, in terms of giving you a context, that will almost give you an import cover of about 4.2 months. So in nutshell, I think those are the indicators that we looked at to inform us of the decision that we have taken yesterday to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.75%. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I will stop there and I will welcome the questions from you. Thank you very much.
We have seen that the government have no physical space to do anything to stimulate the economy somehow. Was this also part of the Bank of Namibia decision to keep the repo rate? Maybe to use the monetary policy as a way to stimulate the economy? And secondly, also in the media, in the previous week, we've been reporting liquidity problem and also commercial bank announcing offshore account. Now, if you look at that, now we kept the repo rate unchanged. It might lead to capital flight. If you are already recording liquidity problem in the economy and offshore account being advertised, will this not motivate more capital flight of the country?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Brigitte?
Brigitte.
I would like to ask a question with regard to the Bank of Namibia's press release on the 24th of December last year about the probable delinking of the Namibian dollar from the South African rand. Your press release was triggered by an interview by our finance minister with Bloomberg. And it caused a lot of panic in the private sector, and that press release tried to reassure everybody, except in the last sentence of the press release, it was said delinking from the South African rand is not a sort of plan at present. And that word, again, you know, caused panic in the private sector. Could you perhaps just clarify on that one? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Kevin. I'm a writer with a Villager newspaper. Just on the global front, the dark clouds that hang over Venezuela, a potential invasion of Venezuela by the States, and the reaction from China and Russia, do you see that as a concern to global growth as well?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gabriel, for those questions, for the two questions on the fiscal policy and also the one on liquidity. With regard to the fiscal policy, of course, generally, it is very necessary in any economy to have a proper coordination between monetary policy and fiscal policy. And each policy have got its function. Monetary policy cannot pretend to address things that are supposed to be addressed by fiscal policy. And in this case, when we are taking the monetary policy decision, first of all, we look at our key mandate in terms of what are the things that the monetary policy is supposed to address. Our primary occupation is to make sure that the link between the Namibian dollar and the South African rand is not under threat, and hence ensuring that there is price stability. I think that's really our primary preoccupation. In this sense, I can clearly tell you that our decision has been based on that and is in no way based on the fiscal policy stance at this point in time. I can be honest with you because fiscal policy is now constrained. If we took that into account, I think our position could have been to cut interest rate so that we can stimulate. But we did not do that because it's something that we did not look at in this context. Two, it's true, I think there has been a liquidity issue in the domestic, among the domestic commercial banks, but it is not really something that we have to worry about. It seems to be a concern in a sense that if you looked at the level of liquidity last year during the same time and you compare it to this year, I think the levels are slightly lower. But the good thing is that generally, when you look at the liquid asset ratios of all our commercial banks, are much far above the liquid asset requirements expected of commercial banks that they need to maintain or to keep. So in that sense, we do not really see any kind of threat with regard to the commercial banks. With regard to the question on capital flight, the interest rate now between the two regimes or within a CMA are fully aligned. They are at the same level. South Africa, which is the anchor country, their interest rate, repo rate is at 6.75%. Namibia is at 6.75%. At that level of interest rate, when they are aligned, we do not foresee any capital flight. So possibly, the kind of liquidity issue that you see now is a temporary. There are interest rate in the market, they are readjusting in the money market, and there is a normalization to that. So we still believe that keeping the rate fully aligned with South Africa does not really cause any capital flight from Namibia to South Africa. But of course, I think if our interest rate, if we lag behind, certainly I will agree with that sentiment. But where we are fully aligned, we do not see that capital flying leaving Namibia to South Africa. So we don't have really any evidence to that effect. On the question by Brigitte with regard to the delinking, it's true. We have issued a statement on the eve of the Christmas Day to give the assurance that we as a country, we are committed to the arrangement that we enter into formally immediately after independence. We do not just sit, we continue to make the necessary assessment of seeing that whether this arrangement is good for us. That's what we do from time to time. All the assessments that we have made so far continue to confirm that the arrangement of the CMA, where Namibian dollar is pegged to the rand, continue to benefit Namibia as a country. And that is the assurance that we have given in our press statement on the 24th. And we will continue to remain in that arrangement. No, it's indefinite. It will be, as I have just said, that we as a country, we continue to make an assessment. And at any point, we will know that when is the right time. The next question by Kevin is the issue of Venezuela. Of course, I think Venezuela is not really such a big player in the global economy, except being a player more in the oil industry. Whatever is happening there, of course, I think as a central banker, I'm not the competent person to comment on that situation. But all what we are hoping is for the situation in that country and for the people of Venezuela to resolve the situation amicably so that the situation will normalize. I think that's exactly what we want to see as a country.
This one is on inflation. Deputy, on you, not only on inflation, but you say the transport might be the one to rescue the economy coming in 2019. Yeah, on Venezuela's case, it's not the biggest player, but it is one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. And if this situation does not stabilize, and is the one that supplies the U.S. Reserves. If the situation does not destabilize in this point, OPEC will make some moves. And yeah, when you guys did the assessment, did you factor this in? Because the transmission, it will come to our local pump also. Okay. Yeah.
Calvin? Is that all?
Yeah, and also now on the drought situation, the water situation. If, because when I was attending one of these public just intervention, the water level, Windhoek, one of that operate there, the water level of the dam in Windhoek is not that exciting. Now, water, if you say now the increase, now the rate, how is that going now to be affecting inflation? You say it's going to stabilize, but given that now peculiar situation of the water situation of Windhoek, we know how it happens. And the last one on construction. Maybe you can just share some light. Construction was performing well when it comes to the previous years, but on these 2 years, the performance of construction, does the monetary policy have an impact on that, or is just purely an economic cycle?
Thank you so much. On the water situation, we understand that the Namibia Agricultural Union and other unions and other political parties are even trying to are even communicating to government to declare a national crisis when it comes to water, when it comes to rain, because they are saying that no place so far has received any good amount of rain, and there's a drought that's on the horizons. The impact of that on our economic growth. But my question is, there was a report that was released last week by Simone Storm Securities, where they indicate that this year South Africa and Namibia are going to be rated by Fitch. Now, looking at the threat of subnormal, I don't know if you're aware of that, but looking at the threat of subnormal growth that we experienced from 2016 until now, and the very dull prospects that we have for 2019, yes, the numbers are going to be positive, but they're not really going to be a needle mover. Are you optimistic of a positive rate?
You mean a positive credit assessment?
Yes, credit assessment, yes. I don't know if you're aware, but the report, because I'm just quoting from the report, which says that we are going to be rated by Fitch together with South Africa this year.
With regard to the issue of inflation, it's true. Venezuela, it's a key player, as I have just admitted at the beginning, in the oil industry. Oil industry, the volatility of oil, it's something that we continue to factor into our projection. So we don't really ignore that. What is being projected now, at least for the next 3 to 5 years, oil prices is projected to be around 55 US dollar per barrel. Unless really something extraordinary happen, maybe then we'll see an increase to that effect. But when we are looking at that level, I think that has almost been factored into our projection as well. With regard to drought and the issue of water, I think, of course, Namibia is a very drought-prone country, and water almost every year seems to be a phenomenon. And that's why, in terms of inflation, when I indicated that inflation for 2019 will settle at around 5.6, it has taken into account things like that. With regard to the construction sector, I don't know whether your question was that whether monetary policy has got any impact on the construction sector, or it was more on trying to gauge that I have mentioned the construction to be one of the sectors that is likely to drive growth in 2019. Is it from that context?
Yeah, let me just clarify. The repo rate is related to the lending rate of the banks.
Correct.
And most of these construction projects, they take loan from the bank. So any decision you make, the transmission always affects this. So construction is either way around is affected by your decision in the monetary policy.
Now, when you look at us maintaining the same level of rate, of course, again, also in our statement, we are very clear on what we want to achieve. And certainly, your concern is also fully addressing that. We are saying that we want to maintain the one-on-one link between the Namibian dollar and the South African rand. And also in that statement, we said that we believe that that rate, it remains appropriate to continue supporting the domestic economic activities. And that includes all the sectors that wants to access the affordable capital from the commercial bank. So in that sense, I think we had a consideration on some of those sectors that we think that they are also affected, and they have to access affordable capital. So there was a consideration on that. I think Kelvin also talked about the issue of water, and I think particularly, I think your focus was more on the rating. Now, if you look at the situation last year, we also had rating agencies, Fitch and Moody, making an assessment on Namibia. Similarly, this year they will also do assessment. Already we had some kind of engagement with fish, and we do not really see major changes that will lead to the rating changes for Namibia. Of course, we know that growth remains subdued, but even if it remains subdued, that outcome is much better than the outcome that we have seen in 2016, 2017, and 2018 as well. So going forward, we believe that that picture is becoming slightly positive compared to what we have seen much earlier. So we will not be much worried in terms of getting an assessment that will have a negative impact on us as a country. I think that's it.
Francis, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the DG, where is this optimism coming from the construction sector?
If you look at the numbers, I think there will be a better performance on the public sector side. If you look at the public sector, let me just give you this information. The contribution of the public sector to the GDP is around 23%. And it's coming from three key sectors. It's coming from health, it's coming from education, it's coming from public administration. Now, if there is any positive movement in these sectors, imagine the weight of 23%. So even if there is just a marginal movement on the positive side, it has got a positive impact. So we foresee that this year there will be some positive movement on the health side. There will be some positive movement on the education in 2019 now. So that will help growth to that effect. Another sector is on construction. We have the government is going to implement a few projects, especially when it comes to public work. There will be some renovations of schools in some of the key regions. I think should be in almost all the regions where government is expected. I don't have the number now, but we got the funding that will be renovating schools, etc., in the range of about 3 billion. So that will help in that respect. Of course, also in addition to that, with the normal residential renovations and some new uptake as well.
Yeah, just on that one, on the government contracts. It just if you have something, that growth in construction. Okay, if now those contracts, because we don't know now, if they are allocated to local companies, or we know that now the construction is dominated by Chinese.
All right. Look, we will be releasing the economic outlook. Is it Senate? Is it in a week or two?
In a week or two.
In a week or two, and those firm numbers that the deputy governor was mentioning, we'll firm them up and we'll be releasing them to you. The deputy governor usually would stay for a one-on-one engagements with you, and you can follow up that question so that we don't take the time of other people that want to quickly go and write the story. So we can accommodate that with the indulgence of the agreement of the deputy governor. Thank you so much for coming to our first monetary policy announcement for the year. We'll see you in another 2 months.